So let's look at some anomalies. There are people who are on the list. Well, there's Lady Diana Spencer and the Earl of Sunderland are a brother-sister pair. It's highly unlikely that Diana Spencer studied mathematics with the Moivre. She would have been 20 approximately at the time, when, or maybe around 20, when the subscription was made. Her father had died several years before when she was about 12, and the Duchess of Marlborough took over Diana Spencer's education, and the Moivre was not involved with any of the Marlboroughs, and they had their own mathematical tutor. So she comes out as an oddity of being on the list, probably not a student. The Earl of Sunderland was possibly a student. The Moivre and the first Earl and this Earl's father were great friends. They both were good chess players. They both met at Slaughter's Coffee House to play chess. And Sunderland was also, again, one of the central people in the Whig faction of his day. So it's possible that the Earl had studied with the Moivre. It's also just possible then that Lady Diana Spencer bought the book because the Moivre was a friend of the family. Not on the list, well, there's an international connection. Nicholas Bernoulli worked in probability. He was on Stirling's list of recipients, and he also corresponded with the Moivre and wrote a paper based on some of that correspondence, but he's alive and well in 1730, yet not buying the book, whereas he's getting a copy of Stirling's book. Why is that the case? Well, that has to do with Newton. Newton fought with Leibniz over the priority of who discovered the calculus. The Bernoullis took Leibniz's side, the Moivre took Newton's side in his best interest, took Newton's side. Anyone in England in their best interest took Newton's side. So there is a rift with the Bernoullis, so he doesn't appear on the list. So there's a rift that occurs with the Bernoulli family. The Moivre is corresponding with the Bernoulli family up until about 1712 to 1714. Edmund Hawley brought the Moivre to the Royal Society. He was the guy who introduced him to the Royal Society. He bought a number of de Moivre's books. He has the first edition of The Doctrine of Chances. He has the first edition of, which was 1718. He has the first edition of Annuities of Long Lives, 1725. He has a number of other mathematical books published after 1730, but he doesn't have de Moivre's book. So he was not a subscriber. So they were friends, perhaps totally unknown. Perhaps there was a falling out between the two. Definitely Halley had a fight with Newton just before Newton died. Again, Newton and de Moivre were close, so maybe de Moivre's caught in the middle, and there was a rift between de Moivre and Halley. Thomas Bayes, of Bayesian statistics fame. That might be the only probabilist whose name you recognize, because it's Bayesian statistics. Currently used today. For many years, people wondered whether or not Bayes was a student of de Moivre. Turns out that Bayes studied at the University of Edinburgh and got interested in probability through Stanhope, one of de Moivre's students, and there is no connection between Bayes and de Moivre, and for that reason does not appear on the list. Let's look now at Walpole. He is a political ally of the first Duke of Devonshire. The Devonshires promoted Walpole, and the oldest son and Walpole were good friends. And a quote that I got out of a book was, the key to Walpole's ministerial longevity was not simply his policies, much was due to his parliamentary management and his control of government patronage. as the Duke of Portland observed in 1725, he never does anything for nothing. So what we did then was to look at Walpole's connections to people on the list. That is, people who held patronage appointments given by Walpole. And that's what it looks like. So here's Walpole, and here all the lines show everyone who had a patronage connection from Walpole. So that leads to perhaps some thought. There's a lot of Whigs out there, obviously, that there's a very strong Whig connection. De Moivre's interest is read as brothered on the Whig side, and so again he's connected politically to many on the list, and the ones who, it also includes most of the aristocrats, because most of them on the list are Whigs, so the list is actually bigger. So if we look at all connections, that's what all the connections look like, and so what we want to do is look at two things. One is the commonality, and one's on who's on the periphery. Commonality will return to Walpole. First thing we want to look at is the leftovers. Who's on the outside, who's not, wasn't included in anything, and those are the people in yellow here. So in separating them out, we want to look at those cases individually to see who's on the outside of this mass of people who seem to be interconnected in various ways. People that we have some knowledge of. There's an astronomer, a teacher of mathematics, a calligraphy writer. These are possibly people who knew de Moivre professionally. There are people on the edge because we know absolutely nothing about them. Those are the people we couldn't find any information about. And there are two interesting people, Edmund Overall and, of course, the Marquis Visconti. And trying to figure out how they are connected to de Moivre is an interesting exercise. Edmund Overall is secretary to the London Assurance Company. This is a marine insurance company, and he turns out to be the only businessman on the list. This ties in, now then you have to think about it, this ties in with de Moivre writing his book on annuities in 1725. So prior to 1725, de Moivre is getting most of his business by tutoring students, tutoring children of people with landed interests. He writes a book in 1725 that becomes very popular. It's how to evaluate annuities very easily. Previously you had a life table, and you found the present value of $1 in the future using logarithms. You found the logarithms of the values in the life tables. Instead of multiplying them together, you found innumerable logarithms and started adding things together. It was a long, tedious process to evaluate an annuity. De Moivre found a very simple solution where you could find the solution in minutes. And so you'd have perhaps business people coming to him, and this is perhaps one of the first ones, because it's just after 1725 when he's written his book on annuity evaluations, people coming to him asking for annuity calculations and evaluations. So after 1725, you can see the first move to a change in his career of being essentially a business consultant. Just a few weeks ago, I was in England and found and read, the early English newspapers are now online and available in the British Library, and I looked up de Moivre and found a number of references to him in 18th century newspapers. One of the references was to the person who I met on the pavement the other day and was nasty to, please come back. I realized you were a client, and I had forgotten that. And this is about 1735. So he's building up a business as a consultant on financial calculations. And when de Moivre dies in 1754, he leaves an estate of £1,600, and I can't believe that he got his £1,600 by just tutoring the students, tutoring the children of aristocrats. Maybe he did. And selling his books.